The wonderful thing about following Steve is that I can just throw away this page of what I was going to talk about. And I will be brief today. In case any of you are really wondering, I was not the designer of this project. I was merely a junior draftsman. I've always suggested to new and interested students in architecture that it is really, for the discipline and the profession, the marriage of art and engineering, and better yet, of aesthetics and science and technology. Just in the short time this conference has been going on, I've learned a lot, especially about circadian rhythm. And it makes me wonder about students of architecture who, as some of you know, legendarily work until 3 o'clock in the morning, 8 nights a week. And it seems that it may be that they are violating everything that we know about circadian rhythm, and it's going to be news to them that there will be no bolt of lightning at 2 o'clock in the morning that will give them the answers that they are all seeking. But how they get through the week is something I've never been able to quite understand. The consilience that was addressed by John Eberhard earlier, I think, speaks to the future of what we want to do with these two fields and offers us the opportunity to pose questions to the students and have them bring answers to us rather than them telling them what they will be doing. And I think that the role of ANFA in all of the schools where these two areas of study are taught will bring them together and other professions as well over the next few years. It was critical after the founding of ANFA that John Eberhard worked together with Eduardo here and in the East Coast to develop the first course in neuroscience for architecture that Steve was referring to. That course was first taught by John and later by Margaret, and after that Todd Carpenter, and then Eve Edelstein picked it up and she's still teaching it now. Many of the undergraduate and grad students take this in the year before they're doing a thesis or even during their thesis because it offers them a way of looking at evidence-based design instead of creating a purely subjective hypothesis and solved in a subjective manner. The results have been amazing, and the work we saw at our thesis show exhibited that wonderfully. We started something interesting this past spring. Eduardo and I taught a course in architecture to students here at UCSD. They were from every discipline. They were neuroscience, they were computer science. None of them had any architecture experience whatsoever. So for the first day, we switched back and forth in the classes, and Eduardo's going to go into detail on that. I gave them the usual half-hour history of architecture. And I'm going to go through that quickly because some of these you might remember. But we talked about originally in architecture, it was based purely on need. What did people need? They needed habitation. We were looking at vernacular architecture only. The kind of architecture that people created in some parts of the world still exists, and it's based on need. I think by the vehicle in front you can see that that was not built at the same time as the previous slide. We all know what happened with nomadic people, creating need, the kind of tents that they had, people still live in throughout the world. And the climate, of course, affects the kind of basic structures that people build for their needs. At some point, as civilization moved on, there were more than just the needs for people. They started developing civic and ecclesiastical buildings. They developed cities. They developed cities throughout the world. We then said, what can we do with these students who have never had any architecture? So the first project we did with them was to assign them to build a box. a very simple box made out of foam core, which to most of you seems like a very simple task, but the variety of boxes that we received, all supposed to be the same size, was really quite amusing. The only thing we asked them to do with that, once it was given, was to assign a scale to it, whether it was 1/8 of an inch to a foot or 1 inch equal 50 feet. That was up to them. And what we did was to provide them with a word. The word, as we've been hearing today, evoked an image, we hoped, starting with what kind of a word, whether it's tension or aggravation or joy, could they use to develop this space. So from their foam core boxes, we all told them about the kind of work that is being done that is not really architecture per se, but it's things like theater sets, museum spaces, where there's a definite direction in terms of having people feel a certain way. Now, the students weren't supposed to share those words with anyone else. Looking at spaces in the interior, not even having to be in it, but to look at it and understand what it was like. Looking at places of despair, looking at places that were created simply for an illusion for a short period of time. The results were quite interesting. In fact, some of them were stupendous, and to their delight and surprise, we were able to take those and create those spaces that they created in the cave. Now, if you ever want to see young people's eyes light up, taking from a simple piece of paper to a simple box and experiencing that space, it was totally worthwhile, and we hope it's going to be a life-changing experience for each of them. Eduardo Macano is going to go into detail about that course in terms of how we tie together the architecture and the neuroscience. So, Eduardo.